Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. Scientific American says that Exxon knew about climate change almost 40 years ago. This belief has been used by states like California and New York to attempt to sue Exxon. It's simple enough to find out what people were thinking about climate 40 years ago by just going back and looking at newspaper archives. Here's the New York Times, January 5th, 1978. International team of specialists finds no end in sight to 30-year cooling trend in Northern Hemisphere. That doesn't sound very much like concern about global warming. And here's the original article as it was printed in the New York Times. They had a picture of the Mississippi River covered with ice. Now let's look at what the Washington Post was saying. U.S. scientist sees new ice age coming. The world could be as little as 50 or 60 years away from a disastrous new ice age, a leading atmospheric scientist predicts. Dr. S. I. Rasool of NASA and Columbia University says that. 50 years from 1971 is the year 2021. So according to the NASA prediction, we may be having a new ice age in about a year. Here's what the New York Times said in 1970. U.S. and Soviet press studies of a colder Arctic. The United States and Soviet Union are mounting large-scale investigations to determine why the Arctic climate is becoming more frigid, why parts of the Arctic sea ice have recently become ominously thicker, and whether the extent of that ice cover contributes to the onset of ice ages. Let's see what the CIA was saying 40 years ago. Frequently freakish weather. Some scientists theorize that the freakish weather of recent years is the product of a global cooling trend that began in the 1940s. Advocates of this theory predict that the worldwide temperature drop could usher in a little ice age similar to the one that lasted roughly from 1600 to 1850. A CIA report supporting the global cooling thesis was released last month. The CIA report warned that world food supplies could be threatened if the cooling trend continued. The stability of most nations is based on a dependable source of food, but this stability will not be possible under the new climate era. The politics of food will become the central issue of every government. In 1972, 42 top American and European investigators met at Brown University and then sent a letter off to President Nixon warning of a new ice age in about a century. On March 1, 1975, the cover of Science News was titled, "The Ice Age Cometh," and they had an illustration of glaciers plowing through downtown Manhattan. The article was titled, "Climate Change Chilling Possibilities." They had a picture of a city covered with a dome surrounded by ice. The unusually beneficial climate of the past few decades may be degenerating, facing humanity with a new challenge to survival. Time magazine said, another ice age. Telltale signs are everywhere, from the unexpected persistence and thickness of pack ice in the waters around Iceland to the southward migration of a warmth-loving creature like the armadillo from the Midwest. Since the 1940s, the mean global temperature has dropped about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Chicago Tribune, it's getting colder. Brr, new ice age on way soon. In the last decade, the Arctic ice and snowcap has expanded 12%, and for the first time in this century, ships making for Iceland ports have been impeded by drifting ice. Many climatologists see these signs as evidence that a significant shift in climate is taking place, a shift that could be a forerunner of an ice age. So the claim is that 40 years ago, Exxon knew about something which the New York Times didn't know about, the CIA didn't know about, and neither did the Chicago Tribune, NASA, Time Magazine, Science News, or just about anybody else. This is another Orwellian attempt to rewrite history. It's also an attempt to shake down Exxon for lots of money. But this isn't the real scam that's going on here. Exxon doesn't produce much carbon dioxide. Cities like Los Angeles and New York do. If Exxon and other oil companies didn't deliver their product to states like New York and California, there would be a complete catastrophe. These cities would collapse into Mad Max-style chaos in a matter of days. So California and New York are suing Exxon for selling California and New York a product which California and New York cannot survive without. The whole concept is completely absurd. These states shouldn't be worried about Exxon delivering them gasoline. They should be worried about them not delivering it. In the 1970s, the United States was very dependent on Middle East oil, and there were times when we just couldn't get gasoline. Sometimes the Middle Eastern oil producers would decide that they simply weren't going to sell us oil, and people would have to line up for hours to try to get some gasoline. Lindsey Buckingham, the singer from Fleetwood Mac, lost his father to a heart attack while he was waiting in one of these gas lines. Fortunately, companies like Exxon have developed fracking, and now the United States is the world's leading oil producer. We no longer are dependent on Middle East oil, and we no longer have to go to war to obtain it. If people on the political left were thinking clearly, they would be very happy about fracking and the fact that the U.S. is no longer dependent on Middle Eastern oil. This chart from NASA shows the cities with the largest carbon footprints: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and of course Paris, home of the Paris Climate Treaty. Exxon doesn't produce CO2, large Democratic Party controlled cities do. If Exxon quit delivering oil to these cities, you can be pretty sure that within a few hours these cities would be demanding Congress and the President take action to get their oil back. If California and New York want to show the world that they can survive without fossil fuels, why don't they just demonstrate to us that they can do it? Once California and New York go fossil fuel free, the rest of us will certainly follow. They say they want to be leaders on this issue, so why don't they just lead and show us exactly how it's done? They keep telling us that the technology is currently in place, so why don't they just do it? Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.